Hello, everyone out there in radio land. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. You can also find us on the Wider app. As always, the following thoughts, views, and opinions are not necessarily those of 89.1 WIDR or Western Michigan University, no matter how dope or insightful they may turn out to be. Coming up on today's show, we're going to do our usual year in review of the quote unquote holiday special 2025, looking at the year that was. Of course, as 2026 has started, there's been some very notable news. And we will be discussing that. We're around 12:30. We're going to have a special guest. Sarah from Kalamazoo Nonviolent Opponents of War is going to join us to discuss that particular bit of breaking news. I guess we're also going to start with some local stories, but before all that, so I know usually we have kind of a tradition on the show. We do the holiday special. There's like an opening holiday themed skit. We've been doing that the last couple of years. Something about this particular year seems a little bit more, I don't know, somber. 2025 was a very serious year. And I was trying to brainstorm a few things. I was like, oh, maybe something themed around the Grinch or the, but it's the type of year where fascism has taken its mask off. The Nazis are running the asylum, so to speak. We also have seen people kidnapped all over the country by ICE, being sent to horrible detention centers, be it Alcatraz, or extrajudicially shipped off to a terroristic prison out of the country. We've seen the rights of trans people continue to be eroded and treated as a catch-all scapegoat for all of the ills and problems of late-stage capitalism. So, and in light of this recent kidnapping of Nicolas Maduro, which could lead to the death of many innocent people, essentially because our alleged pedophile president, wants to wag the dog and distract people while fringe benefit doing a lot of geopolitical maneuvering around the acquisition of oil. So a lot of that, it just didn't quite sit right with me to do some sort of comedy skit. However, I was thinking about it, and we just had the holidays. My Christmas is still not quite finished. I still have to get together with some family. Oh, hold on just a second. Sorry for the lapse. Some spit stuck in my throat. Ow, ow. But we just went through the holiday season, and I was trying to kind of drill down, like, what is the real core of the holiday season besides like the rampant consumerism? And it's about belief, and it's about family. And in that sense, I wanted to maybe just say real quick, here are some things to believe in going into 2026, and some things that I believe in, and it maybe help if you believed in as well. I believe that the working class can one day unite against the capitalists, against the ruling class. I believe one day we can set aside our differences and realize who our real class enemies are. I believe that one day people will see through the smokescreen of the mainstream media that is increasingly becoming a one-to-one tool for the ruling class, in particular the Trump administration. I believe one day people will no longer blame the immigrants, will no longer blame the trans person, will no longer blame people who don't look like them, but who, at least along the lines of class, they have infinitely more in common than a Donald Trump or an Elon Musk or a Jeff Bezos or any sitting Democratic or Republican politician. I believe that the people are becoming more educated the people are becoming more agitated. I believe there are setbacks and there are real challenges that we need to make sure we stay strong against. I believe the encroachment of things like AI and Chat GPT are meant to erode our critical thinking skills, are meant to short circuit this trend we've seen of people and young people in particular becoming more and more class conscious. I believe that will fail. I believe the specter of AI data centers, which will increase our electricity bills and destroy our environments, are going to continue to be met with fierce opposition. I believe that the American empire is collapsing. And I believe if we all seize the moment, we can build something better in its place. I believe in you, all of you out there listening, and all of you out there who don't listen, and all of you out there who don't want to listen, but who may, again, have the possibility to understand and change your mind in the future. I believe in you. I really do. And in dark times, it particularly important. I've kind of told hope is not some lofty ideological or what is it, optimistic idea. In many ways, it is a skill. It is a muscle that you have to cognitively and very intentionally flex and build up to get through these dark times. Revolutionary optimism means that you believe that the working class can get what is owed, can control its own destiny. But as much as there's the famous MLK quote, the arc of history bends towards justice. It doesn't just do it on its own, like a natural act of physics. It is people like us bending that arc towards justice, while people on the other side try to bend it backward. But there's more of us than there is of them. And if we have the strength and the solidarity and the hope, then we can bend that arc. I believe that as dire as issues like climate change, resource depletion, and all those are, we can overthrow the people in power and figure our way out of it through collective knowledge and collective action. I believe that we will win. And maybe that's a little bit of a corny way to start the year, but I hope much needed for myself, and I hope that was much needed for you as well. So with that, I wanted to kind of pivot. We got a couple of local issues starting out the year, and I wanted to hit on them before we again do our year in review. Around 12:30, we're going to be joined by that guest to talk about the recent breaking news in Venezuela. I wanted to start talking. This is an article from Now Kalamazoo. Again, talking about how the austerity coming down from the federal government is impacting us right here in Kalamazoo, particularly when it comes to housing. There's an article from James Sanford and John McNeil. It was published on December 23rd. Housed, but for how long? A long-running federal program to help people with disabilities stay housed is being drastically changed. Kalamazoo County found 3 months' worth of funding for now, but expects it will need more after changes by the Department of Housing and Urban Development. Kalamazoo County will step in with $66,000 in stopgap money to temporarily continue a federal housing program that subsidizes rent and support services for disabled residents. The multi-decade program is run by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, which last month announced it would restrict how housing assistance is spent locally. In this case, the new HUD rules limit funds spent on those who need both rental subsidies and other support systems, which could impact as many as 47 households in which someone with disabilities lives, the county officials said. A federal judge temporarily blocked HUD from implementing the new rules last Friday, 3 days after the Kalamazoo County Board of Commissioners reallocated the COVID-era federal funding to cover the first 3 months of next year. County Chair Jen Strebs had this to say: "We have this threat to nearly 40 years of bipartisan support for funding of this program that houses people with significant disabilities, such as serious mental illness, and helps them stay stabilized in housing with support services so they get meals and medications rather than seeing them evicted and onto the streets." The board said it expects revised HUD rules could restore some of that funding that is expected to be cut, but is looking at utilizing local housing millage tax dollars and other options under the assumption that not all of it will be. Going on, the HUD changes are part of an overhaul of the Continuum of Care program, which in Kalamazoo County coordinates much of the federal funds spent on housing issues. Funds for this voucher program are allocated under a grant to ISK, that's Integrated Services of Kalamazoo, one of two nonprofits that administer a housing voucher that covers a portion of rent paid to a landlord. I do want to kind of circle around here. So this kind of speaks to a larger critique of just how housing works systemically here in the United States, which is there is less of a focus on actually getting housing stock for people who are not housed, and more of a focus on basically paying off people who have hoarded that housing stock, i.e., landlords and property management companies. And that's not to say that, again, it's not important that people get this rent money and all that stuff. But as I have alluded to a lot on the show, a deeper solution to this crisis would be to have, again, a collective people's land bank, or have a city run by workers who could buy up some of that housing stock and turn it around and put it in the hands of people, and not just people who seek profit out of sitting on houses. I also, really want to point out here too, it exposes a lot of the fragility of our current system, because as you know, like, this is, as we spoke about all through 2025, this austerity from the federal government was going to have downstream impacts everywhere, including here. And as we're seeing, the sort of cruelty that is baked into these this new round of austerities via Project 2025 and the big BS bill, really does create a situation where vulnerable people in our community are lacking resources. And we found some money in the banana stand, but how long is that going to last? It really shows, again, how it is the government turning its back on any kind of even just a pretense of a social contract with its own citizens. We can't afford to keep people in your community housed. I mean, we can afford to bomb Venezuela and kidnap their president, but keep you in a house? Oh, no. Uh, you perish the thought. Going down, while HUD isn't cutting the overall funding, it is shifting funds that used to be designated for permanent housing to transitional housing. This is going to be capped at 2 years, which is how HUD defines transitional, said David Anderson, who is the mayor and also ISK's senior executive of housing and director of facilities, which I could say some stuff about that, but that's a whole other rabbit hole. At the end of 2 years, HUD expects people to be able to make it on their own without extra support. And again, this is that model of thinking that, like, oh, just people need to lift themselves up by their bootstraps, and a lot of people have long-term needs. I work in a field where I help with like supported living and those sorts of things, and there's individuals who you know will never attain that level of independence, or will attain the level of independence they can do, but still need some help from the community. And what this does is it's really kind of robbing them of having the resources to do that. Not only that, but I want to kind of cap this off the end of the article, also talking about how this goes into kind of the cultural agenda of the administration. Uh, Basically, the funds HUD provides for permanent supportive housing will be reduced to 30% of what they have been. 30%. That's less than a third. And organizations across the country will compete for the money while trying to meet newly established HUD criteria. Some of the criteria include requirements that local governments implement policies that align with the Trump administration, such as those governing where unhoused people can sleep outside, diversity, equity, and inclusion, transgender rights, and support for immigrants. What that means in layman's terms is they are reducing nationwide the pool of money that communities can access, and it is basically using this as financial blackmail. You need to be as bigoted, as toxic, as racist as this administration is, or we are not going to help you with your housing problems. Because again, there's like they are demanding people turn back the clock on equality, or DEI. They want more draconian measures against houseless people, as we've seen across the country, which again does not work. Criminalizing houselessness does not work unless your goal is to get more people into prison, which again that might not necessarily be a wild or what is it, untrue conclusion. And again, trying to emphasize that communities are as socially regressive as the administration, and basically providing financial reward to people who bend the knee to what is essentially going socially backwards. I don't think this portends too well for Kalamazoo. Kalamazoo is a fairly progressive city, and we have seen we have seen it in the past where the people of the city have demanded the city kind of stands up for the rights of all people. So it may lead to situations where we are not going to have the resources that we used to. We're going to see an increase in houselessness. And one thing I do worry about, especially we see a lot of this from Sinclair, the Sinclair-owned network here, that's WWMT, where when we are having issues with houselessness, you get more and more negative stories about the houseless, again, kind of blaming the victim and trying to dredge up public opinion against houseless people. And you've seen the city itself has also kind of approached a tactic of like trying to make it someone else's problem. Something we deeply criticized last year was this whole bus voucher program, basically giving them like a wad of money to scram. And as we pointed out on this show time and time again, this problem is not going away. It is only going to become more exacerbated as the years go on. And as I've pointed out, like as the economy becomes more difficult, and as climate change, the effects of climate change ripple out into more and more parts of the world, our Goldilocks area is going to be hit with an influx of climate refugees, and there was literally not going to be anywhere to bus them to. So we can figure out permanent solutions for housing, and we have to do it as a community. The federal government's not going to, maybe President AOC will get elected in a few years. But having a social democrat elected to a dying empire is again, it's not going to produce the kind of resiliency that we're going to need, and it is something that we are largely going to have to figure out how to do ourselves. So I don't know, maybe there's ideas. There's a lot of empty houses. And there's a lot, there's other governments in history who were more socialist have done things like expropriation of property. It's funny how eminent domain always gets used for like corporate projects, but never for housing. You ever notice that? Anyway, so just throwing that I'll link to the article in the show notes that was from Now Kalamazoo. Housed, but for how long? It's written by James Sanford and John McNeil, published on December 23rd. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. You can also find us online at Media Cyphers on Facebook, YouTube, and the Media Cyphers Kalamazoo podcast you can find on most podcasting apps. Keep it on lock. This is Media Cyphers, your source for political revolution. Hello, everybody. We're back. This is Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. I want to draw your attention to there's this whole series from Bridge, Michigan, that they've published right here at the beginning of the year about nursing homes here in the state of Michigan. And we're not going to spend a ton of time on this. Our guest should be joining us pretty soon. But I did want to. This is something that's kind of near and dear to my heart, as I alluded to. This is kind of the industry I work in, and it is basically a several part investigative report about issues of abuse and understaffing at Michigan nursing homes. Usually, again, related to how Michigan does not have as good of regulations um, as many other places in the country. I'm going to read a couple of quick excerpts from article published earlier today. Michigan nursing homes have few staff, little training. Misery can follow. It was written by Robin Erb and published this morning. Across Michigan, the state's most vulnerable residents are living out their last days in what inspection reports characterize as sometimes squalid conditions, because many nursing homes are critically understaffed. Positions are tough to fill because nursing aides are paid less than $40,000 for work, $40,000 a year for work that is so physically demanding. They have a higher rate of workplace back injuries than construction workers. By the way, if you think that it's like you are a little mystified by that, there is a lot of physicality that goes into care work that you wouldn't really expect. There's a lot of lifting, there's a lot of bending. There's especially, if you're doing things like brief changes and things like that. Some people have difficulty changing, diapers on infants. Imagine like a fully grown human being. So and again, all that lifting, all of that stuff, it can it's a lot more physically demanding than I think a lot of people really understand. And as the article goes on to say, so far the state and federal government have not stepped up to help. Michigan has about 420 nursing homes that provide care to 34,000 residents. A Bridge, Michigan review found that at least 167 facilities were cited at least 360 times total for lack of sufficient or competent staff in the past 4 years. That is a certain undercount since inspectors are on site sometimes just once a year. Six of these homes are cited more than 6 times each. And again, this goes back to austerity. There is not enough state or federal oversight. There's not enough funding to fund the inspectors, and there's not enough funding to fund the workforce, the adequate workforce that is really needed for all of the clients in a particular home. Going on, Megan O'Reilly, Vice President of Government Affairs of the National AARP office, that's the American Association of Retired Persons, said a basic minimum level of staffing is so important to the quality of life and the dignity of people's lives. It almost feels like you're being set up to fail. There's no way to meet the demand that's set in front of you. Michigan's minimum staffing requirements have remained unchanged since 1978 and require each resident to receive just 2.25 hours of care a day, or 2.31 hours, including time from the Director of Nursing, according to the National Consumer Voice for Quality Long-Term Care, a longtime national advocacy organization for residents of long-term care facilities. That's below the 4.1 hours a day recommended by the U.S. Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services a quarter century ago. Across the U.S., staffing minimums vary widely. Some states have no standards. At least 6 in the District of Columbia require at least 3.5. When Michigan's law passed, people in what many then called retirement homes often were more able-bodied. Today, those same people live in independent or assisted living facilities, leaving nursing homes to care for those with more complicated medical needs, said Sarah Slocum, a longtime consumer advocate and former head of the Michigan Long-Term Care Ombudsman's Office. There's nobody in a nursing home who doesn't need a bunch of help. That's why they're there. Which is to say, and this was actually kind of a good thing. It was not necessarily tied. I've spent most of my career in kind of mental and developmental healthcare, but it also did dovetail at the same time with the deinstitutionalization. But the idea of having more family oriented or a kind of like smaller community oriented homes, which can be a good thing, especially for people who are more able bodied. But because the standard has not kept pace with the needs of people in these long term nursing facilities, who are usually again have are more actively disabled, have more healthcare needs than somebody in like an independent living home. They do not. Again, there is creates a situation where companies can either can get away with not properly staffing um, their facilities. And again, that is one of the main ways these companies squeeze money out. It's not like, you can just, sell more products to people who are the care is the product. So the main way that these companies, especially the for-profit ones, the nonprofits, aren't quite as bad about this, but they are driven by profit saving, which often means shaving off workers' hours. Now, I want to say one like a little caveat here. This situation, based on what is going on at the federal level, it could only get worse because, as I mentioned, nonprofits aren't quite as guilty as this because the nonprofit, but because there's going to be much less federal and state funding. Or actually, I think there is some state funding coming to try to close the gap, but because there's less federal funding, that means a lot of these nonprofits who maybe even might be run by people who have their residents these hard, they're going to have to find ways to cut corners because there's not going to be as much money as there used to be. And this is of course a problem all over the country in the wake of the big BS bill. um, as the article goes on, roughly a fifth of the state's 66 nonprofit nursing homes have been cited at least once for staffing shortages or inadequately licensed workers over the past 4 years. Also, again, it costs money to train up workers, and obviously, workers who are sufficiently qualified, sometimes they are an expectation you have to pay them more. It all comes down to money. Going on. Lawmakers have made efforts to boost Michigan's minimum staffing requirements. Some lawmakers suggested about 25 years ago boosting standards to 2.7 hours a day. Frank cost money with it from a 1998 settlement with tobacco companies for 6.2 billion. Many nursing homes typically exceed those standards, with about a third, 142, providing more than 4 hours a day of care per resident. In all, 13 homes provide less than 3 hours, according to the report. There was an attempt last year, the Biden administration announced staffing requirements that would have pushed daily care requirements generally to 3.48 hours a day. In Michigan alone, the change could save 250 to 500 lives, according to estimates. The $200, and this is really the core of the issue, as I keep getting back to, the $200 billion nursing home industry opposed the change, arguing that it would require finding another 102,000 workers nationwide, an industry already beset with worker shortages, i.e., we don't want to have to pay to train and hire new workers. If you read between the lines, that's what it means. Staffing ratio levels are feel-good measures, but arbitrary, failing to account for individual needs of residents. Put a target on our back for inspectors, said Melissa Samuel, president of the CEO of the Healthcare Association of Michigan, an industry lobbying group. Again, it's this idea that like, oh, the problem is much more bigger and nuanced than just staffing ratios, but they neglect to mention that like this would at least like raise the basement at least. This could only help. It's standard corporate deflection jargon. Like this won't totally solve the issue, so we shouldn't do it, even though it would at least put a band-aid on some of these issues. So better to just let it bleed out, according to again this industry lobbying group. And anyway, I will link to this series of articles in the show notes because I think they're very important, and especially for those of us who have people, older people in our lives who have to live in these nursing homes. It's important to understand that this perfect storm of austerity and the way that our regulations are here in Michigan. Uh, could be quite alarming for our loved ones. Q Dialogue, y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. You can also find us on Media Cyphers on Facebook, YouTube, or the Media Cyphers Kalamazoo podcast you can find on most podcasting apps. Keep it dialogue. This is Media Cyphers, your source for political revolution. Hello again, everybody out there in radio land. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. We're now joined by a special guest. We've got Sarah from KNOW, that's Kalamazoo Nonviolent Opponents of War, good friends of the show. And as you know, we typically spend the first episode after New Year going, "Who was the year that was?" But we had some very big breaking news going
Yeah,
into the new year, and folks here in Kalamazoo are already kind of mobilizing about it. But for those of you who, I mean, obviously, most of you are probably aware, President Nicolas Maduro was recently kidnapped by the U.S. government. Is currently sitting in a jail in Brooklyn over alleged narco trafficking. We're gonna get into the alleged part of that in a minute.
yeah.
But Sarah, thank you for coming on the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I am doing great, and I'm happy to be here.
Okay, well, I guess the first thing I'm going to ask is just so KOW, you guys had a rally last Sunday,
We did. We
and
did.
this is for those of you who are maybe like new to the Kalamazoo organizer scene. They do this weekly vigil outside of the federal building downtown every week. Of course, the emphasis this week was just what had literally happened over the weekend. Um, can you tell us a little bit about, okay, so no gets the news. Um, it's like, oh, we have to mobilize. Could you kind of
Yeah.
just walk us through putting that mobilization together and who came out that day,
Yeah.
what you saw on Sunday around noon?
Yeah, for sure. Let me break it down. So, KNOW, like you mentioned, we've been doing our weekly vigils for, we can say 24 years now, every Sunday from 12 to 1. So, since we've been such a long-standing group here and we're already pretty well organized when emergency situations like this come up, we kind of have it in line, like we're set up and ready to go. What's been really cool happening in Kalamazoo right now is that there are a ton of other people organizing and coalitions are being built. Right. So this past weekend's vigil was bigger than ever. I think we had over 50 people there in no large part because we are forming coalitions with groups like DSA,
Hmm.
Indivisibles, I think, put it out in their newsletter. So people are spreading the word and coming together, which is the only thing that's going to push this movement forward. So we had a lot of that going on Sunday, a couple of speakers, our Daniel and Sarah Ruggles from KNOW got up, Ewan from DSA got up, had some chants, just built a lot of community solidarity and spread some education while we were there. And
Hmm.
some really excellent tamales made by our friend Kay.
Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah,
So kind of with that, so I know a lot of my guests are pretty, they kind of keep their finger on the pulse of what's going on.
sure.
But I do want to like, let's kind of reel it back a little bit. And for those who are wondering, it's like, why did the U.S. government just kidnap Nicolas Maduro and just do some place setting? You've probably heard the administration talk about, as we said, like they're narco terrorists,
Yeah,
narco trafficking. We've
yeah.
had the bombing of Venezuelan boats that, um, allegedly many times just been fishermen, which is kind of
You know, and isn't it interesting with the narco terrorist thing that we live in a country where the DuPont family, for instance, will retain all of their wealth and power, although they have been
yeah.
responsible for a huge opioid epidemic. So, really, who are the narco terrorists that we're going after, right?
Yeah, I don't think I ever saw anybody come to kidnap them in the middle of the
No,
night. No,
no, no, nor
no,
will you.
yeah, no. It is important to note that in the spirit of debunking things, the narrative is absolutely false. There's really no fentanyl production in Venezuela. The main source from that is more often Mexico. It's usually smuggled up by people who look like me. So
Mhm. Yeah.
it is a very manufactured story. And as we've compared this a lot to what happened in 2003, but as somebody like we've both been around, I just, what are some of the key differences you think between the way they built the narrative around the Iraq War
Mm.
and this excursion in Venezuela?
So I think, I mean, the underlying motivation has always been the same. It's always been going in, grabbing resources and coming out. What is new in the Trump era, I would say, is that they're really being less duplicitous about it. They're so out in the open, telling us exactly what their plans are, really, if you read between the lines at all. Whereas the build up, say, to the Iraq War, they spent many months trying to convince us of their narrative, and they took it to Congress, although they didn't need to ultimately. But yeah, so I think a huge difference between then and now is just the boldness with which they are perpetrating these crimes and really laying bare for us in America what I think a lot of us didn't realize, that the depth of our corruption here transcends parties, it transcends administrations. But just so it's the same story, but what we're dealing with now is an administration that just has really no bones about just putting out there exactly what they plan to do. So it's kind of exposing
Yeah.
our lack of will, to
Mhm.
stop it. And that's a huge challenge, but a huge opportunity in organizing.
Yeah, I know it's interesting because a lot of what the administration is, they're very baldly, Trump has been like going in to get the oil, like
Yeah,
he's saying the quiet part out loud.
yeah,
Um, and they've been referencing, I think particularly like Pete Hegseth's referencing like the Monroe Doctrine.
yeah,
And something interesting I've seen is like a lot of some conservatives and even some more centrist people is like, well, it's a doctrine, and they don't really have an understanding of
the
what that is.
origin of that
Yeah.
doctrine. Yeah,
So
yeah,
if we could maybe spend a couple minutes and talk a little bit about what that is, and again, it's not like a law or like an international treaty.
correct.
It's literally just a type of foreign policy. Do you want to maybe explain a little bit?
Well, I mean, I hope I
Yeah,
don't flub it up too much, but
yeah,
my understanding is not an instructor in this field
yeah,
is like so many other doctrines or policies that we've established in growing this country. Um, I mean, it just sort of gives us on paper seemingly the go ahead to go in and extract resources that we think are better served, for whatever we deem the greater public to be.
yeah. And just to really emphasize too, like when it's called like a doctrine, it is more or less just like 19th century political figures saying, uh, finders keepers.
Yeah.
They described Latin America as their sphere of influence, i.e., all the stuff is ours.
Mhm.
Europe can back off. And the reestablishment of the Monroe Doctrine is basically just the
Yeah.
administration saying everything in this hemisphere is ours. Stay away. A lot of what is going on is tied to that. You
Yeah.
look at
They literally tweeted this
yeah,
morning, right? Our hemisphere
yeah.
with a picture of the entire
Hmm.
hemisphere.
Yeah, I know
Yeah.
some people. Oh, sorry. Some people have kind of clapped back at the idea. Oh, it's not about the oil. It's actually more expensive to extract the oil in Venezuela. But you also have to understand from a geopolitical perspective, the their biggest exporter is China,
Hmm.
and it's less about. I mean, yes, the oil is a nice little bonus, but it's also about keeping kind of geopolitical rivals from accessing those
100%.
resources. Yeah.
I mean, Cuba right now is in the crosshairs and they're not being able to receive oil from Venezuela. So, I mean, yeah, the oil grab isn't just because we want to be the ones selling it, it's that we don't want anyone else to be the ones selling it. Exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
The geopolitical ramifications are huge and really bare outlined for everyone to see.
Hmm. Yeah. On that note, I was wondering if we maybe talk a little, re-explain for some of you out there, kind of the concept of the petrodollar. Back in the 70s, it was basically, I think it was the Nixon administration, if I remember right, but it was basically, it was set out that oil would be traded in US dollars, which allowed the United States a lot of leverage over basically the rest of the world,
Right.
over kind of the flow of oil and the necessity of using the USD. And over, very recently, we've seen certain countries, certain states try to move away from that, including people who've historically been allies of the United States. Saudi Arabia comes to mind, where they are looking at, trading in yuan or kind of setting up their own kind of independent exchange. And if you are somebody who cares about, keeping the U.S. empire in life support, this is very bad news. I know. Do you have thoughts on that? Why it's bad news, or
I do.
yeah,
Why it's bad news for the empire?
for the empire?
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure. I mean, the United States has, I mean, historically, right? We're the biggest genociders on earth. We've never gone through a system of truth and reconciliation to try to fix our foundation before moving on, right? So then we became this sort of warrior ethos of the world where we've made ourselves indispensable to some of our allies because we've kept all this military might. And if you look at like the industrial military complex in this country and its ties to the oil and energy um, industry in this country, you see how that has been our main source of controlling the rest of the world. So, yeah, people moving into independent energy, countries moving away from the US dollar, the petro economy you referred to, is real bad news for a nation that set itself up to just be the policing knee on the neck of the rest of the world. So yeah, I mean, we all know like you can even relate this to like any kind of abuse situation, right? So once people become empowered, they become knowledgeable, other countries can trade with one another. Uh, the mystique of the amount of power that the US holds really just starts to disappear and it starts to show itself for the smoke and mirrors bully kind of an imperialist endeavor that it's been,
yeah, absolutely. I don't think I'd
in
have
my opinion.
no, no. I mean, I don't think I'd have too much to add to that. I guess other than just like it is, as we're seeing, if the US kind of loses the petrodollar, that really kind of gives up the game. A lot of our power is tied into how enmeshed we are with that particular aspect of the global economy. And several other things have been, accelerating our loss of that, independent energy, or not independent energy, green energy, I should say.
Yeah, renewables.
And also just, yeah, the way that a lot of these countries do want independence from that petrodollar because, and I think in a way, this is really going to backfire by, the way the Trump administration has really just kind of eliminated all of its like soft power, look at
Mhm.
like the stripping US aid and all that, and just transitioning to like, might makes right. That might give a temporary boost, but it is also going to incentivize all these other countries to understand the United States is not stable. They will, act impulsively against the rest of the world. We need a form of economic independence from them,
Yeah,
otherwise we'll be kind of under the heel. And I think in the long term, this is actually going to accelerate that transition from the petrodollar. Um,
I agree.
yeah,
And climate will push that too anyway, right?
yeah,
We have very little option other than to remove ourselves from that sort of economy eventually
mhm,
to survive. It's the interconnectedness of all of this that I think is going to be the part of the ultimate downfall of this system too, because it's just unsustainable, right?
mhm.
And I listened to you earlier, touched on like climate refugees, and you know, there is going to be always mass migration around this globe. The days of any nation first sort of policies, it just doesn't work. It's just not sustainable in today's world.
No, no, not at all. I want to kind of move on. I've been talking, so I took it upon myself to reread. There's this great book. We'll link to it in the show notes. I think I mentioned this last week. Building the Commune, and it's all about like kind of the grassroots communalism in Venezuela. And it's something I've been thinking a lot. Again, a lot of the media, and again, go back to the Iraq War. You can just copy and paste a
You
lot of this stuff.
can.
They're going to embrace us as liberators. Look at them celebrating in the street
Yeah.
about
Hearts and
yeah,
minds.
yeah.
Hearts and minds.
And I think it really, I don't, it's hard to understand how the administration thinks it's going to go, but from their rhetoric, they think it's going to be this, just hearts and minds smash and grab. The people don't like Maduro. They're going to welcome us. They're going to give us their oil.
Mhm.
Um, and it really does not understand kind of the popularity around the Bolivarian revolution and how that works ideologically and culturally in Venezuela. I'd say even with Iraq, there was more open and widespread disdain with like Saddam Hussein, but that doesn't mean they wanted the Yankees to come in.
Exactly.
And
Well, and our
yeah,
and our motivation is, when you have gone in and destabilized a country, as we did with Iraq before we invaded, they had been suffering under sanctions for years. It was, very much a nation on its knees before we went in with our, what was
yeah.
it, shock and awe,
Oh,
we
yeah.
called it.
Oh, side note, Venezuela as well. I always bring
Yeah,
this up is, a lot of the economic misery we point to as like an indicator of the Venezuelan government's corruption is direct result of our sanctions, which think
100%.
I think they estimate kill about 30,000 people a year. Sorry, it was a bit fuzzy memory. I'll link to that in the show notes,
Yeah,
but
lots.
yeah.
And the entire global South, really, we've done that too. And so I think we can take like this moment in time, what we've done in Venezuela, as a very clear indicator about what the maybe not so long term, but what the next step goals are for the Trump administration. I don't think that Venezuela is the last country that will do this to, clearly. Um, yeah. Yeah, we help destabilize. It's sort of the same pattern like you've been saying. We go in, we do like a couple of generations of massive destabilization. We do regime change or puppet regime change. We leave a bunch of weapons behind and we leave a country in turmoil, and then we close our borders to their citizens.
Yeah, that's man, that's always something. Was it a few years ago, the first Trump administration, where like it's like, oh, a caravan from Honduras, caravan
Yeah,
from. Gee, why did people have to leave
yeah,
Honduras?
yeah.
The answer is America, by the
America.
way. Yeah,
That's why.
yeah.
But the average people, like here we are in America, right? And we have got our own social problems. So people are struggling and they don't always have time to educate themselves about what we're doing in the rest of the world. And so when you see like somebody make a comment, like the people in Venezuela have been suffering under a dictatorship for X number of years and this family is corrupt, I still say, but even if you don't want to delve into why the country got the way it did, it's still not okay to go in and kidnap another leader
Mhm.
and run someone else's, country.
Yeah,
So wherever you are politically, I just don't see anybody getting behind this.
yeah. I think
And
like one of the big memes I saw right after this happened was either like, it's like, well, you're welcome to go grab Donnie, or like, so I assume this means we're gonna like get Netanyahu next time he comes, right?
right, right.
The global genocideer.
Actual president.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so uh, I think like one thing that kind of strikes me too is you're talking about like most Americans don't really agree with this. They don't really again, we don't even like I do the show and I don't know everything about like Venezuela or whatever. I've never lived there or traveled
Right.
there or anything. But one thing that does strike me is and somebody pointed this out. This is like at the onset of a military, what could be an extended invasion or operation, has the least amount of support of any engagement in American history. Like something like 60, between 60 and 66% of Americans polled do not agree, do not want us to get involved
Yeah.
in Venezuela. Um, the Trump administration is basically saying we can do whatever we want without really even laying down the groundwork of propaganda. It's interesting.
Exactly. Without even the courtesy of like dinner first.
No, no, yeah, yeah. Um, but I was kind of curious, does that aspect of this moment kind of give you maybe like how do you feel about that? The fact that, and it is kind of dispiriting because the The opposition that we see at the federal level is essentially a lot of Democratic senators and congresspeople uh, critiquing the Trump administration for not going through the correct procedure. You
Exactly.
got to ask Congress first before you kidnap a
Exactly.
president.
Exactly.
um,
Because none of them will just say
yeah,
kidnapping a president is wrong
yeah,
because, they're all in this gross electoral political mess, which in parts of their minds, they will convince themselves that in their situation, it might be appropriate to kidnap a president. So let's not, I mean, really, politics is just that gross in
yeah.
America,
Mhm.
both parties. Yeah, so I mean, that's I guess part of what you were asking me. On the federal level, the response is way too muted always. But then again, these are the people who have not ceased to pay for a genocide for 2.5 years, both parties. This is, it, yeah, I mean, we need a massive, massive restructure. And I really feel that the only real honest work is being done on a grassroots level by groups like, KNOW,
Yeah.
by people
Mhm.
here, because this is where we can have impact right now while we're still trying to grind through on a federal level and get some impact made there. It's like everything goes in stages, when you try to get to the upper levels, it is so much time. There's so much gatekeeping, but we're grinding, we're getting there. When we're organizing on the state level, longer time, but we're grinding and we're getting there. Like Michigan Divest just got some great things done. And and we're doing stuff here in town. But yeah, on a federal level, it is so freaking frustrating.
Yeah, I'll cut my follow up to that, and this is always the big question when the government is doing this really big thing people don't agree with. Like, what can we do? What can we do against
Mhm.
this behemoth that is using our tax money to do this? And one thing that comes to mind, just to kind of table set for this question, is, I do want people to understand sometimes that question is asked out of a sense of helplessness and hopelessness,
Mhm.
but I do want to emphasize, I look back at a lot of the work your organization did around the genocide in Gaza. And this is our 10-year anniversary. We'll be talking about that more. So, but when we started in 2016, it was still a very niche opinion that
You bet.
Palestinians should have rights.
You bet.
But we've seen this almost complete 180
Yeah.
in public consciousness since October 7th. And I do want to emphasize, that was not like, there wasn't some charismatic person just being like, hey, Palestinians should have rights. It was the tireless effort of groups like yours
Mhm.
all around the country agitating in the face of some pretty stark oppression.
Yeah. And
Um,
also social media. I mean, we're living in a time of social media now,
mhm,
right? So people can see what's happening on the ground in Gaza. That helped us to organize and change some minds too. But you're so right. Like when you started back in the day, if you would have said, we should have a free Palestine. First of all, most people would look at you and go, like, I don't even know what you're
yeah,
talking about.
mhm,
Where's
yeah.
Palestine?
I thought
What is
weren't they
that?
the bad guys? That's what
Yeah,
the movie said.
yeah, yeah. They're the terrorists, right? I
Yeah.
mean, it's they're the ultimate scapegoats. They really are. Um, but yeah, I mean, then we were much more dependent only on major media sources to give us our information, and you know, organizing. I will say, right after October 7th, people were still freaked out. They did not want to say free Palestine. They did not want to. They didn't know what they wanted to do. Um, but those of us who've been watching the game knew what was coming, right? So we knew when Biden embraced Netanyahu that a full-out genocide was going to begin and not end. So the difference, I guess, is there's a huge organization in Grand Rapids right now that's grown out of that. Grand Rapids,
Mhm.
opponents of war. And yeah, I mean, it's just spreading like wildfire. And I'm seeing in Kalamazoo right now, and I've been an activist for a long time. If you're not watching the podcast, you can see I've got wrinkles and some grays here. Um, Never before have I seen so many grassroots jumping up on all levels, right? Mutual aid, voting things, politics, socialism, freedom for Palestine, no war for oil. I mean, it's a beautiful kind of a thing. And when you opened your show today, I was listening outside and I wrote something down that you said. You said that hope is a skill, right? And that it's a muscle and it needs to be exercised. And you talked about revolutionary optimism. And Man, I mean, that is it. That is it. Because I do feel in this moment, really, for making progress, we are all we've got, right? So it takes all of this ground level stuff. This is really the power base. No movement goes anywhere without it. So, I mean, it's encouraging to me, even though it's the same story, different time. We are constantly bringing new people in, and then always looking for people of all levels of education about this subject to come and join anywhere. There's a lane for everybody in fighting this tyrannical government that we're dealing with right now.
Okay, great. So I don't want to keep you too long. I really do appreciate you coming on the show. For folks who want to, learn more about the situation or maybe get involved with KNOW, how would they do that?
They can visit us online at kzoo4peace.org, and the four is a number. They can sign up for our emails at newsfromno@gmail.com. We're on Instagram at Know Your Humanity, Facebook, Kalamazoo Nonviolent Opponents of War, and you are always welcome to come every Sunday to the federal building at 12 o'clock and get some righteous indignation out and meet us in these streets.
All right. So this was going to be like the closing. I just thought of one more question because
Okay.
you mentioned Grand Rapids opponents of war, and literally just the other day they were doing uh their big response to it, and one of their organizers was arrested on air.
How
And
beautiful is that, right?
yeah, yeah.
She's out now. I
Mhm.
I was on a chat yesterday with one of their other organizers, and they spent the entire day fielding media requests like CNN, Washington Post, I think.
Yeah.
So there's going to definitely be some attention about that. But yeah, that was outrageous.
Yeah, it's like I don't know what that particular cop was thinking, but I think it's a perfect example of the way sometimes organizations can kind of do some jujitsu
Yeah,
when stuff like this happens because yeah, like you said, um it became a exponentially larger story than if the cop had waited until after the interview
absolutely.
to arrest them.
Absolutely. And
Yeah,
that there's like this whole I mean, we're all under a certain amount of surveillance. And I think this points to that
yeah.
too, that incident, because uh she was mostly questioned, as I understand it, about who fellow organizers were.
Oh,
So
yeah.
this is a note to,
Mhm.
those grassroots people I was talking about earlier. You're making a difference when the authorities are asking you who you're hanging
Yeah.
with.
By the way, the official line is that she was arrested for like incommoding on the sidewalk or something.
Yeah,
So yeah,
yeah.
It's,
Yeah. Well, I
yeah,
think they had walked
yeah,
earlier, in the street. So they were,
yeah,
yeah, it's a bogus thing. She
yeah,
was the only person arrested, and there were many people in the street. But yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
This,
that'll be an
yeah,
interesting story to watch. Keep looking for her. Brave
yeah.
girl.
If
Good
you
organization.
ever find yourself in that kind of situation, there is there's so many amendments. Fifth one, just remember
Yeah.
that. And, typically, organizers will have like a legal support number for you. National Lawyers Guild is always a big one, but
Mhm.
always, whoever you're organizing with, kind of check in the
Yeah.
organization
I know there's a
first.
GoFundMe set up for her defense right now too.
Hmm.
I can't
Yeah.
off the top of my head, I can't think of what it's called.
Okay. Well, I think we'll go ahead and leave it there. Sarah, thank you so much
Thank you,
for the
Andy.
show and for being out in the streets. Can't see it. Just wearing a very dope hoodie. It's like full of it's like a lot of Black Panthers and
Yep.
yeah,
Says
yeah.
all my heroes have FBI files.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Thank you once
Thanks,
again.
man. This
Yeah.
was great.
All right. Everybody else stay tuned. We got more of the show left. We're gonna go over the year that was 2025. Oof. Keep your dialogue. You're listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at Wider FM. Or you can find us on YouTube or the Media Cyphers Kalamazoo podcast. You can find on most podcasting apps. Keep your dialogue. This is Media Cyphers, your source for political revolution. Hello again, everybody out there in radio land. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. Big thank you to Sarah from KNOW coming in to talk about Venezuela, the recent kidnapping, and grassroots community response to it. So I'm not sure if our co-host Lawrence is going to be joining us today or not, but I'm gonna kind of get rolling and talk about some of the big stories of 2025. And I'm going to start here at the local level. One of the big stories that I wanted to talk about was again the continued campaign to protect Asylum Lake from an extra car wash because we need one of those, the Drive and Shine car wash. Um, so just a couple of months ago, there was a zoning meeting where over 70 Kalamazoo residents came out and expressed their discontent with the idea of developing anything and that uh, plot of land near the preserve, which the city mistakenly sold as commercially zoned property something like 10 years ago. For those who don't know, the CEO of Drive and Shine has been trying to develop this property, coming back over and over again, despite public backlash to it. I shared a meme about this after. It's kind of that SpongeBob meme. It's like, how many times do we have to teach you this lesson, old man? Um, and if you go back, we did a really good interview with an organizer around Protect the Preserve about why this issue keeps coming back and the importance of protecting the preserve. But it was a really good example, I think, in a year where a lot of us have been kind of dispirited by the oncoming fascist overreach of the Trump government that again our citizen democracy at the local level still really does work. And despite the fact that the car wash guy has all the money, we have the people, and we were able to basically go up there and get a unanimous recommendation from the zoning commission to not develop on that property. Now this story is not over. Unfortunately, it may rear its ugly head in a couple years, but we the final word on it before the city commission is going to be coming up on January 26th. Um, they are going to be holding it at City Hall, and they're expecting a really huge turnout. They actually originally were trying to see if they could move the venue from City Hall to somewhere else. What they decided to do was they're going to hold it at City Hall, but they are going to arrange for capability of call-in comments, which honestly they really shouldn't have stopped doing. Like, I'm sorry if it makes the meetings longer, but I'm not sorry because that is the job of the city commissioners. They are supposed to listen to the citizens and their comments. No matter how many there happen to be. So they are going to allow phone-in comments as kind of an effort to prevent or reduce overcrowding at the city commission meeting. It remains to be seen. I would be really surprised if the commission goes against the recommendations set out by the zoning commission. Um, However, never say never, especially, we've got some new incumbents or new commissioners who have really vowed to protect the reserve. Drew Duncan comes to mind. So that is going to be coming up. And, I think it is, again, also just a good example of the way that we can get together and protect our green spaces, protect our community, even at times when it seems like we are on the back foot at the federal level. We can still come out and preserve what needs to be preserved here in the state of Michigan. So again, a big hats off to all of the tireless organizers who have been working year after year to protect Asylum Lake Preserve from development. And the struggle continues. On a similar note, I think this was also a watershed year for AI data centers. And this has been a huge problem, especially around the country. We've seen big corporations trying to build these AI data centers, usually in like more rural or small town areas. And people don't find out about them until too late. They end up getting built. They end up increasing everyone's electricity bills and polluting the area around them. I think we've kind of come to an inflection point where even a lot of everyday people who maybe don't listen to media ciphers or comparable program are aware enough of what AI data centers do that they have started standing up and being, giving a very loud and clear no where these places. And this has happened several places here in the state of Michigan, just to the south of us, kind of nearby Vicksburg. We've seen this up in the UP and up north. Um, we've seen this in Saline, which unfortunately might be like the one uh, kind of L in this kind of statewide story. But um, I did want to at least highlight that at least in some of these other areas, um, it people did success were able to successfully push back against the building of these large AI data centers. And I did want to kind of emphasize or like kind of highlight what happened in the case of Celine. Back on Thursday, this is from an article in Live. I will link to it in the show notes. Michigan's largest AI data center um, can move ahead after DTE wins key approval. On Thursday, December 18th, state regulators cleared the way for a massive artificial intelligence server warehouse for Chat GPT creator OpenAI and cloud computing giant Oracle to connect to the grid. The 1.4 gigawatt project set to occupy farmland in Saline Township, south of Ann Arbor, would be Michigan's largest, promises to draw more electricity than 1 million homes. Hold on. So already, we're seeing like, and kudos to M Live for underscoring like this is a huge energy suck. They're not trying to obscure that. They are informing their readers about that. That's good journalism. It can now move. However, it can now move forward because the Michigan Public Service Commission conditionally approved special power contracts between the data center and utility DTE Energy on Thursday while imposing a litany of requirements for DTE along with the green light. In doing so, regulators cast aside growing calls to expose the deal to greater scrutiny over the coming weeks. However, they argued the well negotiated solid contracts will benefit other utility customers, and the President DTE must formally commit that the data center will cover all of its own costs. If not, the utility itself must pick them up. This approval is contingent upon DTE Energy or DTE Electric agreeing to bear all the risk of any costs incurred that are not recovered from the data center, said Catherine Paratic, one of the members of the governor appointed commission. In a statement, DTE didn't say whether it would accept that condition. It has 30 days to do so. The case sparked protests, drawing widespread attention and comments from more than 5,500 members of the public, amid concern over the impact of big data centers on the environment and power bills. A key approval comes nearly 7 weeks after DTE first filed the contracts with the Oracle subsidiary Green Chili Ventures LLC, made public only when significant portions redacted. The utility, which expects a 25% increase in electric sales to the project, wanted regulators to okay them on an expedited timeline without formal hearings or legal review from outside groups. The law allows such ex parte consideration when the approval won't increase power costs for other customers. DTE promises that will be the case with the data center, pledging it will actually make electricity more affordable. Yeah. But advocates argued that the for-profit electric utility, Michigan's largest, hasn't adequately backed up that claim while pushing for swift approval. DTE has approached this proceeding as if it wants to make sure no one looks under the hood. Coalition of environmental groups and consumer watchdogs wrote in December 12th filing. The organizations, as well as Dana Nessel, Michigan's Attorney General, have repeatedly called for regulators to put the DTE contracts through a contested case. Then they could request discovery materials, file their own legal testimony, and cross-examine witnesses. Without that step, the process appears to be a rush job that looks as though regulators under extraordinary industry pressure will rubber stamp whatever DTE wants, said Nessel. Public Service Commission Chair Dan Scripps defended the ex parte approval on Thursday, seeking to allay concerns. Commission staff carefully reviewed the full unredacted contracts using its unique audit powers to test DTE assumptions and reproduce its modeling, he said. Schips argued special contracts like those for the data center are often approved through an ex parte process, citing several contracts for large solar projects between DTE and big customers like Ford Motor Company and the University of Michigan. Excuse me. Going a little bit further on in the article, rushing approval through an ex parte process lets DTE brush past important questions and shields the utility from the transparency the public deserves, Dana Nessel said in a statement. She decried the Public Service Commission decision, noting it is impossible to verify the protections offered by the contracts or regulars' conditions while the full contracts remain secret. When the utilities and NPSC cut corners, Michigan tax ratepayers are left unprotected, Bessel said. And I want to kind of evaluate it. So they basically, there was enough public pressure for there to be an understanding that DTE had to respond to it in some way. This quote unquote guarantee that they would cover the cost, which they have not yet agreed to. Important to point that out. Um, it seems to me like an attempt to try to placate or assuage the worries of the public. Um, and at some later date, the environmental and financial costs of it will eventually be offloaded onto Michiganders at some point. Um, and it does go to show that there is still, while these victories are possible, um, I mean, this is the system we live in. What they fail to mention, ex parte, this particular process is usually only meant for like emergency infrastructure to fast track. What is the emergency involving building an AI data center? That does not feel particularly urgent to me, unless you're a company like OpenAI who needs to keep building up infrastructure to try to get as much profit in before the bubble bursts. That's my big prediction for 2026, or my big hope is that the AI bubble will burst. And I know that's going to have a lot of bad downstream effects on the economy, but AI, at least the way that it has been pushed out there by these companies, it is the worst version of AI. Maybe only Skynet. Skynet might be worse, but um, the way that they've positioned as a way to basically, it's going to eliminate jobs. It is going to make people actively stupider through the overuse of programs like Chat GPT, cripple our, critical thinking skills. The dark underbelly of AI is that they pitched this as this revolutionary technology that was going to change everything. And when they realized that they weren't going to be, a lot of people find these AI programs annoying, and they weren't gonna get the return on investment. They're now turning to the darker underbelly of AI. It's being widespread use to create pornographic images. You've probably heard the controversy recently of Grok creating child sexual material after being prompted to do so. This is they originally pitched this as like, we're not going to use it for that. No, no, no. And then they realized this might be the only way for them to make money off of it. And it opens up a whole Pandora's box. Some of you are, it's already happening where people are creating sexually explicit images of people without their consent. Um, it's really just like, and the environmental cost, of course, is not without they. Michigan is they are the AI companies are looking at Michigan with greedy eyes because of how much fresh water we have, and they need that in order to build these giant AI data centers. They've at least successfully are moving forward with one of them, ostensibly saying the state has essentially said you can't pass on the electric cost to customers, and DTA was like, okay, maybe we'll think about it. hmm. So what it is we are fighting something very existential, which is it's this new flavor of the week technology that all of the tech oligarchs have rallied around as like the big next thing. And all it has done since it's really been introduced into our lives is take work away from artists, take work away from people, made again all of our interactions dumber through people overusing Chat GPT or Chat GPT being used, customer service. And the only way they can extract profit from it, one of the only ways, is through this gross, morally bleak use of the tool to create pornography against people's will. And to the credit, some people, politicians and stuff, are trying to, impose regulations about this, but the torrent is flowing. It's too little, too late, and why do I hope the AI bubble bursts? Because the sooner they trip over themselves on this, the better. And that's not to say there might not, there can be good uses for AI in context of medical study and data and stuff. It can be a useful tool, but the way that they have tried to push this onto us for everything from creating concept art to using it as like a tool to goon off to, um, it paves the way to a very bleak future. I saw this cartoon, and not to get too graphic, but it's like this guy. He's living in this desolate landscape. He's strapped to a table. Like he doesn't have any limbs. He's just got like a VR headset pumping 24/7 AI porn, like a fleshlight, and like he's getting drugs and protein matter pumped into him. It's like this is just like it is bleaker in many ways than any of the cyberpunk dystopians could have ever imagined. But I think the big hope is a lot of these, most of these tech oligarchs, all of them really, none of them are as smart or genius as the villains in these cyberpunk novels. They probably like to think of themselves as such, but these are a lot of goofy, incompetent, megalomaniacal people who hopefully are going to be, you know, hoisted by their own bad math. And yes, I know there's going to be a lot of downstream effects on the economy, but you know what? It's going to be worth it to me. I will eat beans and rice for a couple years if we watch the horrible use of this technology face plants. It will be worth it to me. So that was one of the big stories of the year for me was watching the resistance in Michigan to AI data centers. And then another big story that I wanted to highlight. This was back towards the middle of the year, but this is another important Michigan story. Was the Dana Nessel versus Palestinian liberation, and the way that again, I think it needs to be highlighted. This is Dana Nessel ran as a progressive. She ran on this sort of like appealing to the Bernie Sanders people from 2016 and 2018 and all that. And she ran as a progressive prosecutor. And there's some things that we can criticize her about. She really fumbled the bag on the whole Flint investigation, but I think ever since what happened with October 7th, she really revealed herself as somebody who is politically compromised to Zionism. Has, you know, she ran as this advocate for working people and the little guy, and she ostensibly used her power all through 2025 to try to prosecute college students who protested against genocide. And the brazenness of a lot of this investigative activity, it was, I mean, it was gross to behold, but particularly as people who, progressive Michiganders who worked so hard to get her to win that first primary and who worked so hard to get her elected, it felt like a very deep, deep betrayal in a way that I think even when we were first reporting on this, we didn't really emphasize. Because again, and in the national left reporting about this, they usually leave that out. They leave out that she ran as a progressive. But Michiganders remember, and it is not progressive to politically prosecute people who are exercising their First Amendment rights to protest against genocide. That is, is, and in fact, in the first year of the Trump administration, you had Dana Nessel working hand in hand with the federal government, the FBI, to break into people's houses to try to chill the organizational scene in Ann Arbor and the University of Michigan, which didn't work, by the way, but. It was probably the biggest political betrayal I've seen in a long time here in Michigan. It would be like, oh, I don't know. Like it would be like I don't know. Like Don Cooney. if he like spent his post career going after people for speaking out against it. Obviously, Don Cooney is a kind of a real progressive politician. I think finally retired. I don't know. He might run again. He said it. I'm just never say never. He said it before, so we'll see. But yeah, it really just emphasizes how when socialists or progressives try to go into the political arena, we need to be very wary of ideological opportunism. And again, I know a lot of people call it purity politics or whatever, but you have to be careful. It's like if we don't vet the people we run, we could run into a situation where, like, okay, you've been trying to defend people in nursing homes and this, that, but you're going to uh, become absolutely Trumpian when it comes to people fighting for Palestinian rights. It was an embarrassing spectacle to behold, and one that I hope we all take some deep lessons from in going into the future. All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, I'm going to talk about some of the national stories and international stories that made 2025. Keep your dial locked. This is Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. You can also find us online at Media Cyphers on Facebook, YouTube, and the Media Cyphers Kalamazoo podcast you can find on most podcasting apps. Keep your dial locked. This is Media Cyphers, your source for political revolution. Hello, everybody out there in radio land. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or widerfm.org. Sorry, it's kind of a long break. Had to use the little activist room. So we've only got about 10 more minutes. So let's get right to it. The big stories from 2025, kind of the national, international level. I wanted to highlight a few things that, it's one thing I could think of: the assault on trans rights over the course of this year has been really appalling and shocking. And a lot of this has kind of gone underneath the radar. A lot of people have not really been talking about it, but this is maybe like the main, this has been a main touchstone in the culture wars for the current administration for a long time. And there is probably the most alarming thing that happened towards the end of the year was um, the Trump administration creating a national trans youth care ban, which basically they pledged to ban gender affirming care for transgender youth through a rulemaking process sized up in Congress and the legislative process entirely. I'm reading from Aaron in the Morning. It would bar any hospital system that participates in Medicaid or Medicare from offering gender affirming care to transgender youth, regardless of whether that care is paid for with federal funds or privately. If enacted, it would represent the most sweeping executive overreach yet by the administration in its campaign against transgender people, and appears to be advancing precisely because similar measures, still passed by the U.S. House, face steep odds in the Senate. Now, in response, the ACLU has pledged to take the administration to court if the rule is finalized, vowing to challenge its implementation. This is going to be, if this actually goes into effect, it's going to be very devastating for families across the country. Again, this is kind of where things were headed. And I'm going to be honest, if you've ever engaged in that rhetoric around, like, well, I don't know about trans people in sports or bathrooms, you helped pave the way to this dumb and bigoted reality where we are now, the government is literally getting in people's business, but the government is getting in people's pants. They're trying to determine how families can operate. They're trying to determine what children are allowed to do with their own bodies, which is pretty rich coming from this administration. And yes, we will talk about that in a second. But it's been, again, an appalling year for the rights of trans folks. But there has been a lot of pushback. We've seen, towards the beginning of the year, there was a more inspiring story about, I think it was a Republican legislature in one of the Northwest states, majority Republican legislature, actually treating trans people like human beings and kind of backpedaling on a particular decision. Again, a lot of this depends on the the rate at which this anti-trans rhetoric gets peddled out in the mainstream media and how much pushback there is. I think some people are starting to finally realize that, trans folks were kind of the canary in the coal mine. And as the rest of our rights are now being trampled and infringed upon, it would have done better to kind of stand with our trans brothers and sisters. So I think there is a little bit of hope in the resistance and pushback to it, but it has been a really terrible year for trans rights, who the GOP and Project 2025 the administration have really made their pet project to make trans people as miserable as possible. Um, Towards the end of the year, we had some of the new revelations come out of the Epstein files. Probably one of the most revealing things being that the government was so incompetent that they did not redact their files properly. You could actually go back and de-highlight things in your word processing program. And the peak irony of this is because it was largely a result of Doge. It was Elon Musk unilaterally deciding, well, we don't need to renew these Adobe contracts for the premium service. And apparently, without the premium service, they don't know how to digitally redact FBI files. So a lot of stuff they didn't want us to see ended up getting seen anyway. Probably one of the most notorious ones to come out was the allegation that Trump, um, content warning, raped a child, got them pregnant, and then had their baby thrown into Lake Michigan, which is a very odd way to link that back into the state of Michigan. But I think it was kind of a sobering reminder to everyone. I think like almost as kind of a coping mechanism, a lot of us see just the dumb, like dramatic behavior of the president. We can make fun of him for being an idiot and for being a drama queen and all this other stuff. I mean, that's been in motion. One thing we failed to mention with the Venezuela stuff, and almost because it's more important for us to focus on systems, but some of what's going on in Venezuela is because of how much of a prima donna the president is. He saw Nicolas Maduro dancing in a celebratory fashion on TV, and that's one of the things that like that was the straw that broke the back and got made him want to do this kidnapping operation. Machado was lined up to take over as president, and now he said, "Well, I don't think she's got enough support in the country," which is true. She doesn't. But also, people in Trump's inner circle say a big reason that happened is because Machado was supposed to just turn down the Nobel Peace Prize and give it to Trump, and she did not do that. And that's a big reason she's not president now. It's like combining all of the evils of imperialism with just the stupidity of just this Biff Tannen like president. But I think that particular leak from the Epstein files, the Lake Michigan case, it is a sobering reminder that our country is being run by a monster. Jeffrey Epstein himself said he was the worst person he's ever dealt with, and that's saying a lot. Or Jeffrey Epstein says you are the worst human being. That says a lot, and it's sobering and surreal to think that somebody who just has such hollow lack of morality is the most powerful person on the planet. Um, I mean, if this is the character of the people again, it honestly, I think it says a lot more about us than it does about Donald Trump because he is an obvious. Anybody paying attention, no, this is not a good person. People fell into his cult. Yeah, I think that part of it is just ignore. He's like, well, he's a bad guy, but he's our bad guy, right? Something like that. Honestly, this is on all of us. And, not to say like, oh, why hasn't somebody overthrown the government or Luigi time. Um, it is to say that it is a failure of all of us that we have allowed this state of affairs to occur. And before Cash Patel tries to, get me for incitement, let me clarify something. The idea of the president being bleach eater or whatever, that is also kind of a symptom of our culture. It's this idea that, like what happened to Charlie Kirk last year, who was killed by was probably a right-wing troll, the Griper. It's that even when we understand there needs to be some sort of change, that we cannot allow this kind of situation to move forward, it's always these individualist, adventurous solutions, and that wouldn't do anything, honestly, because if Trump got killed, who's president? JD Vance. What we need is a working class that is strong enough to really rise up and turn the screws. And the people of Venezuela, they know this game. We kidnapped Hugo Chavez. We did the exact same 20 years ago. They brought the country to a screeching halt, and they had at least economic leverage over the United States. And Hugo Chavez was returned to them. That could be us. It could be, but we need solidarity and we need to unite like we never have before. Maybe consider that your New Year's revolution. All right, we're going to wrap things up. Thank you again for tuning in. This has been Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at Wider FM. You can also find us online at YouTube, Facebook, or the Media Cyphers Kalamazoo podcast. Thank you again for listening, and everybody out there, keep on fighting for that revolution solution.